This is easier than on a computer.
Let me know if you need anything else.
Okay, thank you.
And we've got everyone here now, so you can start whenever you're ready.
Okay, sounds good. Close this other door. Okay, I'm loud. Anybody who knows me, I'm very loud. All right, so welcome to Forms. Hopefully your last segment of your whole orientation. What do you guys think about doing this in a breakout sessions instead of a full day or 2 full days? Or
I liked it. I don't know. I like not sitting all day. I'm not a good
right,
sitter.
right. What do you?
Yeah, it worked out good for me.
Did it?
So.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would have rather have done it all together.
And all in one, right? Yes, there's probably always that 50-50. So,
Yeah.
well, good to hear. So I'm Sharon Burgin. I am a broker here in Great Falls. I work for Dustin Young & Company. I'm one of your past presidents of the association. And I've been doing real estate for 22 years. So I've seen a few changes over the years. And kind of just going to go through some basics on forms. Please know that you can always call me if there's something that you're going, I don't get it. Or we're going to, depending on how much time, who might fly by it and they're like, I had it then, but I don't know. So either ask your brokers or your trainers within your office, or give me a shout, or any of the other people that you've listened to in the different segments, because we're all here to help you. This isn't a one and done kind of deal. As you'll find out in real estate, nothing is one and done, because there are times where things will not make sense the first time. And then you're going, I think I heard about this somewhere, and now I need to use it again. So with that, let's start with introductions so I know who everybody is.
Josh Clark, I'm with Russell Country Realty.
Russell Country, okay, awesome. And you're out of Great Falls here?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Kim Blaine.
Forget your last name.
I do like 6 Zooms in 2 days. I'm just like
Right.
chasing myself. I'm a teacher here too in Great Falls. I'm doing both real estate and teaching. And I'm just curious.
Okay, awesome.
Shelby Copeland and I'm with Desk School Israel's
With this class, okay. And who do we have on Zoom? Hello? Eye in the sky? Anybody? I don't know who we have on Zoom. So we'll just keep going. So has anybody worked in your forms already? You have, I know.
I've had 2 listings here.
Nobody, some of you have, some of you haven't. So is everybody using Transaction Desk, or are you using Zip Forms or Dotloop, or everybody's Transaction Desk?
I'm
Okay.
transaction. I've never heard of the other 2.
So as a forms provider, the state provides 2 different forms program. One is Transaction Desk and one is Zip Forms.
Huh?
Zip Forms was our first program. Then we went into Transaction Desk, and we went a couple years where we were trying out both of them. Both are a great online platform, different benefits to each program. I tend to prefer Transaction Desk. I did do Zip Forms prior. Where the biggest difference is the back office and the help you can get from your brokerages. So when we do Zip Forms, there's a point where your forms go away unless you download them. Transaction Desk, they stay in that cloud forever. You should always still back them up, because you never know. You might get out of the business, you might do this, you might do that, or computers crash or systems go down. There's always a good chance that you need to keep copies of those extra things other than what's in your form, your office files. So many people are going to a online everything, which is great to a point. You always have to remember you need another place as a backup, because this isn't just your transaction, it's also your brokerage's transaction. They're probably backing them up somewhere. You want to back them up somewhere in case you move to a different office, or you're trying to find something on a weekend and the files are in storage downtown on a holiday and you can't get to it. And then you can at least pull up your stuff. Dotloop is another program that is provided by a lot of the franchises, that they'll do the Dotloop program. It's just another forms provider. It's not one that's common for the state of Montana. Ours are typically Transaction Desk and Zip Forms, and they are part of your dues. There's no additional fee at this point. There are talking about pulling one of them out, because we're a little bit better. I think we're more towards Transaction Desk right now than we are Zip Forms, where for years we were exactly 50-50 throughout the state. And it's just depending on how you want to use your programs. So when you're in your Flex dashboard is what I call this, and everybody's dashboard is probably slightly different. You can modify it. I don't know if you guys have gone in and modified, but you can customize this to fit the way that you want. So you can either, where's it at? Okay, so you can either go in through Transaction Desk, if you have it as a hot button on your menu bar there, or you can go in under the menu and go to Transaction Desk. Does everybody remember if you put a star next to it, it becomes your quick button, your quick links at the top of your dashboard. So you can either save it in there so that it'll always come up and be up on top, or you can pull up a house, or if you're in a listing and you need to make an offer on this property, you can select Transaction Desk right over here on the right-hand side, or this little button right here. Right there. So those are your quick launch buttons. Also from your regional dashboard that comes up, you cannot get to Transaction Desk from there, only zip forms. You have to do your Transaction Desk from within the program. So it's nice because when you hit one of these two buttons, it automatically populates the information that pulls you, to pull that listing into what you're going to make an offer on. So we're going to come back to that in a minute. But once you open your Transaction Desk, does everybody have their Transaction Desk open?
My computer's updating. I'm probably just going to be watching.
Okay, sounds good.
So that I'm fine.
No problem. So everybody should come up to the dashboard. There's a couple of different ways that everybody comes onto this screen. The dashboard is the most common because it shows you where you're going to create a transaction, what your recent transactions are, some of your forms that you've been in recently, your checklists if you've created them. So if you like to create your checklists and have them in place that you can mark off all the things that need to be done and keep it all within that file that's there. And the same as tasks. What are the tasks that you do on every transaction? So when you do your first few, keep a running checklist of like things that you've done so that you can make a system. So when you get so busy that you're having a hard time keeping up, you're kind of falling back on, okay, this is what I need to do. I didn't forget a step. If it's a rural piece of property, did I call for septic? Did I call for well? Did I call for plat maps? Things like that. Or is it an in-town property? So kind of just be making mental notes on a pad of paper of things that you do as you go through that, because down the road, you're really going to want that, especially if you look at somewhere down the road hiring an assistant or having a partner, then you're both doing the transaction the same, not what makes sense to you and what makes sense to the other one. This is my process every single time. So when you're in your Transaction Desk, one of the places that I want you to go is down here on the left to where it says Setup. So this is where you take care of your branding. This is where you're going to make sure that the preference is set up the way that you want it to go. So you're going to load your photo, you're going to load, make sure your website's on there, your company website, the correct property, the correct office address. You're putting in all that information and just basically going through every one of these and linking them up to your data. One of the things you'll find if your system is not working right every so often, or when you open a new computer, pre-flight system check comes up. That's to ensure that everything is up to date. So it does run off of Adobe. And so sometimes, you're in between those updates on Adobe, and that's one of the things that does not operate properly in there. So it'll just pop up pre-flight system check, and a bunch of green check marks will come up that says that it's good. If there's something wrong, it will tell you and how to fix it. So whether it needs an update of something or you have something turned on or off or toggled weird. So anytime you're on a computer that has never opened that program, it will do that. And then every so often after that, we'll do it just to make sure you're up to date. So that's good to do. So your preferences are going to be your user information, office, email signature, because of course, remember, you're emailing from this program. So what does your information show up as? When we talk about branding, when you've probably talked about this in different segments, is you need that same consistent look all the way across everything you do. So the signature block you put into Flex, the signature block you put into Transaction Desk or Zip Forms or your email, they're all the same. It's your photo, it's your information, so they have a quick place to look for everything. Branding is going to be your photos, your logos for your company, or any other information that you want on there. These are settings for specific forms, checklists, things like that that you want to go through. It's really easy to create and change things around in here, so it's kind of nice that way. If you're going to use like a cell phone, make sure that you're activating, because otherwise you won't get onto it on your phone. So you do have to go into linked applications to get a code to open it on your phone. And every so often it dumps it. If you haven't used it on your phone in a while, or on a tablet or something, it might come back and say you're not. Please enter the activation code, then just hop on a regular internet connection and log into Transaction Desk or through Flex, and then it'll take you to get that code so you can do that again. Clauses. So one of the things that happens that you'll find during your time in this industry is there's wording that you hear, or there's wording that you see that your brokerage has, or that you've received in another offer that you're kind of going, mental note, I need to remember this as a good way to word something. One of the things you can do is create a clause. So you can create your own personal clauses, which is, like I put the COVID-19 amendment in there when that was sent out by MAR. So now I don't have to retype it. I don't have to search where it is. I'll show you how you're going to drag it into a document. But you can create these, because we all have the days that we're really eloquent and other days when we need to write a buy-sell and we're going, I have no clue how I want to say this and I need somebody else to look at it. So a clause is for your use to put into your buy-sell or your listing agreement to make it quicker for you to complete it when you're working with a customer. Office clauses, if your brokerage has office clauses pre-built, so like we have one that talks about doing the seller paying closing costs. I have it pre-built in there for our office so that they don't have to type it, and it's just a preference of what we have. But if there's certain verbiage that your brokerage prefers, this is where it'll be, so you can drag it in. If there are clauses that if the system clauses are ones that were created by MAR or by Transaction Desk for everybody to use, they're not going to do that because they're not selling real estate, they're providing a program. It's your brokerage that's going to help you determine what you do or do not need to have in there. So clauses are great things to have. Creating different types of transactions, checklists, your templates. Here's something else that's really nice to create. So you don't have to go in there and go, what forms do I need? You know, every single time, who do I need to call to figure out what forms I need? And one of the things, I think it's in your packet, but you can go under, where's my stuff? The Montana Code Annotated will tell you Forms Guide for Brokers and Salespersons, which is what is required by the state. So these are your auditable documents that you want to make sure that you're having in your folders, and or what your office says. So your brokerage will have other forms that are specific to your brokerage, so make sure you're including those in your office files and what you're getting your customer to sign. But if you were audited tomorrow by the state of, by the Board of Realty Reg or MAR, this is what they're going to be looking at. So make sure you get a copy of that, and I can give you a copy too if we need to, so that you can know, all right, here's what I need for each one of these types of transactions. And that's when you create the template, because now you're creating a template to use every single time, no questions asked. You may or may not use a form for a specific transaction due to an age of a house, like a lead-based paint disclosure form. Anything after 1978, you're not going to use that form, but it's still built into your template, so then you just delete it out when you don't need it. But at least the overall setup is the same. So templates are a great thing to have. If you're on a team, there's different ways of doing teams. Sharing, the only way you can share your forms or your files with somebody within your office. So if you're working on something and we'll just use it, you need to send it to Kyle. instead of emailing it to Kyle, and then he calls you and tells you, no, do this, you can actually share the transaction with Kyle so he can make corrections within it, instead of you having to email back and forth and making sure you're not missing something. So you can create a share. It's only shared with somebody within your office. Service providers, I think it's a bunch of other stuff. So that's the quick area that I tell everybody that you want to get into when you get started, because you want to make sure that your information is correct and what everybody else is going to see, and you know how to use this program. This program is phenomenal, but it can also be very basic or very robust. It depends on what extent you're going to use. Kind of like your Flex and your phone and our tablets and everything else that we have, it's as good as you want it to be. There's great tutorials. They're wonderful to have, to work with. What you're going to do is just go over into the help buttons, or like this page is, what do I do here? But there's help buttons to go in and actually walk through, and they'll do a video walkthrough of what's going on within the program. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a transaction. So there's two ways to do it. We can either select create a transaction, and the first screen that comes up is how we're going to name it. So name it something that makes sense to you. What are you going to remember that person by? So if you're working with an investor that buys multiple properties, you might use a last name and an address. Or if you, and depending, if you're better with numbers or names, it just depends on what makes sense to you. But just make sure if it's the same name and you're doing multiple properties for that person, you're dropping the information into the right folders, not grabbing the wrong one. I tend to like to do a, if I can type, I tend to prefer a last name and the address, just because it makes it simple for memory. If I can't remember the address, I can remember the name usually, or vice versa, depending on where you're at. So then if you have a template built, you're going to create it, you're going to select it here. So like I have one for purchase residential. Now, one of the nice pieces is you can import that MLS information. So if you start from this screen and you're not a typist, you don't want to re-enter the legal description, you don't want to enter all the information that you might forget, then you can actually import it. So if you say, if you click Montana Regional MLS, residential property, here's our MLS number. You can highlight it, copy it, and drop it into there. You are the selling agent, or are you a dual agent, or are you, know if you're statutory, what are you working as? So you'll see when you drop this down, how am I representing that person? For your first few, I would say use the wizard. Just because it's kind of, it just walks you through a lot simpler. You can also just create it. Then you select create. So now you're in the wizard. Now, what you're basically going to do, everything down the left-hand side, we don't have to worry about right now. We're going to work with everything on the right-hand side. The more information you fill in here makes your transaction entry a lot simpler as you go. So you don't have to enter their name every single time. You don't have to enter the address or what the listing date was or what the purchase agreement date is. So what this first page is called your details. If you spelled something wrong up here, you can correct it. You don't have to keep it that way. It's open or it's active or it's under contract, depending on if you're going to use any of these types. And then you're going to go through here and fill in information. So making sure that your address is correct, the MLS number. Sometimes the legal populates, sometimes it does not.
Sharon,
Yes.
what's the difference between open and active? What's open?
You know, I use open when it's something that I'm working on. Like I'm not there yet. I'm not, it hasn't become a signed listing.
Oh,
It hasn't
okay.
become a signed buy sell. Like I'm
Just putting it
thinking-
together.
Yeah, like it's, let's say you've asked me to come out and look at your house and I'm putting some stuff together,
Okay.
or a buyer broker agreement, and we're gonna meet for the first time. That would be an open because I don't have anything signed by you. It's just a possibility. Then once I have a document signed by you, whether it's a buyer broker agreement, or even we've gone through understanding relationships, we're going to that next step. Then I'm going active because I'm actively working with you. Once we go under contract, we've bought a house or we're selling a house, then we go under contract or pending, depending on which way you prefer to word it. And then once you close it, because you've been paid, you're going to close it in the system, and then you can archive it, which just pulls it farther out.
So if you were working on putting a listing together, but it wasn't actually going on the market for say another week or so, you could be putting this in, but you would just keep it in an
Yep,
open
that's
status.
what I do. And then I can move it over to active once it's actually actively listed.
Oh,
Or we're actively going to that next step.
Then Jake and I could quit arguing.
Keep listening.
No, he doesn't.
So who knows how a legal description is supposed to be written? Does anybody remember that from their test? So a legal description for a city property is lot, block, subdivision, right?
Mhm.
So what happens, what you'll see in this legal, the reason I'm fixing it, is because they're copying it from cadastral or from the tax record, which puts it in backwards. Because they look at things by subdivision first, then lot and block. So a true legal description is lot, block, subdivision, or it's your range, township, and a plat map or a survey number. Please correct the legal descriptions so that they're correct. Because otherwise what happens is we're not filling it out properly. One of the things you have to remember in writing a contract, you are the author. You are responsible for what you do here. If you write something incorrectly or you inadvertently omit something, you just gave your customer an out, good or bad. So make sure you're covering all the lines, make sure you're thinking through a lot of that stuff. It's easy to copy and paste and throw it in there, we've all done it. Just try to remember that, hey, we gotta make sure that our legal descriptions are correct because that legal description is what transfers through this whole transaction. So when we go to title and we get our title commitment or our profile, this legal description needs to match that. Then when you get the buy-sell, or not the buy-sell, I'm sorry, yes, the buy-sell, but also the lending documents, that legal needs to match that. It's our job to be looking at that on our documents because I have had this where it says lot 1 and a quarter of lot 2. The agent did not write it properly because they just copied out of cadastral, which is not a full, accurate legal description. And so at closing, we had to fix adding a half a lot on everything to include all loan documents. Today, that means an extra week in your transaction. Now explain that to some people when everybody's trying to move. So make sure you're watching your legal descriptions. The other thing that happens when you're dealing with rural property, you'll see in your cadastral or your tax record, it will say NW1, 2. Well, that's actually northwest half of northeast quarter, you know, when you went through the whole northeast and northwest and all that stuff. Well, if those aren't spelled out right, to some that says north NW12. What does that mean? How do you verify that legal description? I had one property one time during the foreclosure, they omitted a whole line accidentally in the legal description of the different northwest quarters of the southwest half and all that stuff. They had to go back through foreclosure to start over. Luckily, we caught it before we closed. Otherwise, that could have been an even bigger mess down the road had that person sold with the wrong legal description and trying to go back. So please know that you are responsible for what you type and what you fill in and don't fill in. And you need to make sure that you're protecting yourself, your brokerage, and your customer, along with the other side. We're not trying to slide something by on somebody. We're trying to provide the best picture of all of it. So that's my soapbox about legal descriptions. Okay, so your legal description does not populate into the program. So you do need to either copy that by a copy and paste, or you need to type it in. These lot and block information over here on the left-hand side, it does not go anywhere. It doesn't populate into any documents. You don't have to worry about that. So then you have your list price. So what is your offer amount? If you're typing this and you haven't met with your customer, you're pre-preparing, you might not fill it in there. You can fill it in within the document. Deposit is your earnest money. We don't necessarily totally know what their true total financing amount is. We have an idea, typically because you're talking to the lenders and your customer before you're ready to buy some. Property includes. One of the places that you're going to look is when you are in the house, you should be making note with your customer. What do they expect? What's staying? Is the storage shed out back staying? Even if it looks tied down, put it in your buy sell. Know that that can be a very huge bone of contention the day of closing. I had to pay $4,000 for a storage shed on a big house one day. At closing, we get there, and the house is built, beautiful home, garage or shed, sits on a concrete slab, so no reason why you would think that it was not attached. Built identical to the house, an exact replica of the house, dormers and everything. Day of closing, the seller calls me and says, so do your buyers want the storage shed or can I move it? Like, but it's tied down. And that was exactly my answer. I said, well, it's on a concrete slab. How are you going to move it? Oh, it's not tied down. I just skirted it all the way down to the ground. It's on runners. I can take it out of there today. Well, yes, they would like the storage shed. Well, that's going to cost you $4,000. Like, okay, there goes that commission check. Luckily, there was enough commission check to cover that and get something back. But still, like, those are the things you have to think of because you don't, it seems like, and that was a very expensive lesson when I first started, is having something like that happen. So think through those things, you know, what outside stays, whether it's lawn ornaments or it's a storage shed or is it a dog run, like something as simple as a dog run. And inside, you know, does this chandelier over this door look like it might be something somebody would want to keep? This house here, they have a big moose antler rack lighting fixture above the door. It's like, does that stay? Does it go? Like, it doesn't fit with the rest of the house, so you're kind of thinking it doesn't stay, but what's going to be replaced with it? That's what you need to know, because that should be written in your buy sell. Is there storage units that look like they're built in, and they're really not? And then all of a sudden the room's going to be just a big open room and they close. So that's what's going in your items included. And also you can see in this section of your of your MLS agreement under additional property, what else stays. So it'll talk about microwaves and ceiling fans and different items like that. So make sure you're putting those in there. Also looking at your public remarks, not your public remarks, I'm sorry, your member remarks, what's excluded? Is that ceiling fan, is that chandelier excluded? Is a storage shed, a hot tub? What's being removed? So that you notate that in your documents, and that's where it comes into what's excluded. If there's leased items are going to be talking more like a propane tank, a water softener system, a security system. That's what's going to go in that section because it should mentally remind you that you need to ask, what is that cost to continue it? Is it staying? Is it going? Do we need to get our own? So once you've completed all of this, you're going to do the check mark right up here, which is your save button. So you notice that we pulled everything forward from the MLS, so it shows the listing agent, the seller, and the listing broker, and it added my information. Now I would go in and add my customer's information, is what would happen next. So you would actually select add a customer. Make sure that you're putting in as much information as possible. So create a new transaction contact. So who are they? It does make a difference if you mark buyer or seller because it will put the information under the right, the correct section of the buy sell and your signings. Otherwise, you have to keep loading them in every single time. So we're going to put in a buyer, first name, Johnny Test, his email. Now the legal name is actually how they're going to sign. Do they use a middle initial? Do they use Jonathan instead of Johnny? Your name, first name and last name is what you know them by. So it's usually, if it's a Jonathan and you maybe call him Johnny or something like that, then that's what your first two are. Your legal name is his full, true legal signature. And his preferred signature may be different than his legal name. He may actually sign Johnny Test. And then his initials are the next one, which goes down here. So then you save that. Now you have buyer, seller, both the agents and both the brokerages. If you need to add other people, you can add other people into here. So you can add your title company, your lender, all of that, so that it's all like in one spot. You can use this as a contact management software for that particular file, so that you have everybody in one spot who you need to email to. Then we're going to go to forms. Because we created a template, all of my forms come in. Otherwise, what you would do is you would come over here to add. And we're a purchase agreement. And now these are all the forms that are available within your library. So you don't have to create anything. They're there. You're just filling in the blanks. If you're unsure of what it's called, you can actually come up here to the search button or the search block and type in kind of a generic occupancy prior to closing, occupancy post-closing. You can type it in and it'll bring it up if it's available in the way that you're thinking it's worded. So what we would do, so in this scenario, we would be marking the forms that we want. So you're filling in the circles of the forms that you want, which your brokerage is going to tell you what your required forms are for a purchase agreement. And then you're going to tell it to add, and it will bring all the forms in. Now, because we took the time and filled in the details and the contacts, it's going to populate. Now what we're going to do is just verify that all of our information is in here correctly. So one of the forms that I use is for your protection, get a home inspection, because I believe that this is a great segue to explain to the buyer just what is going on. What's the difference between a home inspection and appraisal? How would you explain that to somebody?
The home inspection is more thorough.
Mm-hmm.
You look through the house more thorough, and appraisals value.
Yeah. So the other thing is, who's it for? Home inspection is for the buyer.
The buyer.
That is strictly for them. That is to ensure that they are having somebody that does not have a financial interest in this property telling them what is wrong or not wrong with this house. Because who's going to tell them what's wrong or not wrong with the house? The seller. So it's an independent party hired by that home inspector, or by that buyer, as to who they're going to use. So yes, you are correct. They're more in depth. They're going to go through a lot more things. The big thing is reminding people that the home inspection that we worry about is major safety and health issue. I'm not worried about the cracked outlet. I'm worried about the furnace or the electrical or the plumbing or the sewer, things like that. So that's part one. The appraisal's for the bank. Buyer doesn't go on the appraisal. Nobody's there typically unless the seller is home just by a fluke when he or she shows up. They're ensuring that the bank is covered if the buyer defaults for whatever reason. They're looking at only structural and major house issues, like stability of the house. That's what they're looking for, because they do have a checklist that says, are these things okay? They're just not as in-depth. So you hear a lot of people, a lot of buyers will go, well, this house just isn't going to appraise. Why? What do you mean? Why would you say it's not going to appraise? Well, my friend said that it's not going to pass a VA appraisal. Why not? What are we thinking? Well, it has chipping and peeling paint. Okay, that's a valid point. Well, it's dirty. Yeah, they don't care. Although I did have an appraiser once tank an appraisal because the house was a disaster. So do tell your sellers, please keep the house at least slightly tidy. They understand that you're cleaning and packing, but don't make it a total distraction for them. But it's making sure they understand the difference of those two, because they feel like the appraisal comes first. The appraisal's last. It's the home inspection that's first, that is protecting you, the buyer, the seller, and the other realtor, to ensure when everybody moves forward, we're all on the same page. And it also gives us an idea of what could be called for on the appraisal, so we can pre-work that through with our sellers. So I like this form for that purpose. I just have the buyer's initial on here. It also goes into talking a little bit about radon gas and doing a radon test, but basically saying, buyer, do any and all inspections you deem necessary. We'll help you with it. Mold disclosure is actually talking about if the seller has any knowledge or reports pertaining to mold in the property. So if they said to you at one point, well, you know, I had this little spot down here, I just cleaned it. Where did it come from? Like, you need to get more information. Did they have somebody come in? Was there an air quality test done? Things like that. You need to make sure that we're passing that along for that other side. Mold is a hot button issue when it comes to complaints and, of course, lawsuits and buyers and sellers being upset about this. Authorization, consent to communicate. This is a form that I use, and the reason that it is not a required form, but I think it's a great form, because guess where everything is about how to contact that customer on that document. I actually have them type right in when we fill these out. I actually say, here, please put down your phone number. Who do I call first? Who do I call second? What email addresses? So nobody can come back and say, well, you didn't write my email address down right. Or I only wanted mail, or I only want this, or this is your place to talk to them about how do they prefer to be communicated with. What's the best way? And it's also great because if they're on the do not call list and you and I are in the same office and you're filling in for me when I'm on vacation, you can't call them unless I have a form that says that somebody else can call them. Otherwise, you're not in the transaction with them, only I am. So it also helps that do not call list, making sure somebody's not saying, hey, you know, I never told you to call me on that number. Yeah, you did. You filled it out. So I use this form. I think it's a great form for both buyers and sellers. I do it right up front when I first meet with them because I want them to give me how to contact them. And it ensures that we're having that conversation about what's the best time to talk to you? What is the, you know, how do you prefer to be communicated with? Do you want Facebook Messenger? Do you want text messages? What's too late? What's too early? That type of stuff. So then your buy sell. So now remembering that when you became a licensee, you were given the limited right to practice law. The only thing you can do is fill in those blanks. You can't change what's pre-typed. That's done by an attorney. The moment you start changing that verbiage, you have now started to practice law. Please don't do that. You can change in a blank line that says, hey, you know, I know this says this about the inspections, but here's what we're gonna do. You can add things, just don't get into the habit of crossing through what's already pre-written. Find another, talk to your customer, talk to your brokers, find out how is the best way to go through and how do they want you to correct that. So tenancy, who knows the different types of tenancy?
Tenancy in common?
Who does that cover? What happens?
Oh my gosh, you're.
You didn't think I was
Joint
gonna let you
tenancy,
just sit
there's
here.
tenancy in common, joint tenancy, isn't joint tenancy isn't that the married one?
Yes.
Yeah. The tenancy in common is just two people, right?
Well, it can be more than two people. So joint tenancy, first right, or rights of survivorship, which is the first one.
Come on, people, help me out. It's quiet, jeez.
It confuses me too. That's what I'm just.
Come on, I'm
You're
gonna
like,
take this
we're
test.
stupid. We have,
God.
you're here, you're gonna cover it all. So joint tenants rights of survivorship means married couple most of the time.
Yeah.
Something happens to one, their half reverts to the other. Could be a brother and sister, could be two friends, however it's set up. Tenants in common means that all four of us have a percentage interest in that property. So it could be that I have 10%, you have 50%, you guys each have 25%, however your numbers are working out. So, and then if something happens to me, my portion goes to my family. Your portion goes to yours, your portion goes to yours. A lot of times you'll see tenants in common in a second marriage when there's kids on both sides and who gets their portion if something happens to one of them. You'll see it there, or business partners that are going in to buy a property and they're going to do tenants in common, single in his or her own right. You can be married and filing as a single in your own right. And that's when you are getting the loan only in your name. So you may have a spouse, but they're not on the loan. So then you're single in his or her own right. They add a little caveat that says a married person. So it's not, the spouse doesn't get mad and say, wait, what do you mean you're buying this by yourself? What about me? No, we're gonna add you on title later, but it's just during the transaction, it's a single person.
Why would you do that?
Because the other person can't qualify. So like if the spouse has bad credit or not, especially in a young couple, or maybe one is just out of college and their credit score isn't great, but the other one does qualify, or one's military, the other one is not, you may put the loan and everything in one person's name. And then at the time of closing, we sign a quitclaim deed that adds the spouse to the title, and you're gonna switch it to a joint tenancy. So it doesn't affect the loan, it's how you ensure that both parties are on the title.
But so they're not on the loan, they would just be on the title.
Correct. And that's done at closing or just after closing. So it's a good way to do it. We see that a fair amount of times because things do happen, people's credit scores, or it is a single person and dad is gonna be on title at closing because they don't wanna have one name on title, but it's their house. But if something happened to that person, that child, then they don't have to go through probate and everything else. So it just depends on the situation. Or if you're unsure, mark other and put in there to be determined. That's a conversation for the title company to have with the customer or the lender to have with the customer. That is not for us to give them advice. We're just explaining what those 3 or 4 are. Other is also a corporation, you know, that type of stuff. So that's the other reason you'll see this here. If it's a husband and wife and only one name is on the loan in the buy-sell, you might still mark other and say to be determined because we know we're adding the wife at closing or the husband at closing type of deal. So, and you can talk with your brokerages about how they do that, what they prefer. So of course, then you see all this stuff is pre-populated because our information is in here. Sometimes these fields do not carry forward, so you may have to copy and paste. This first section talks about what's included, or I'm sorry, what's excluded. So you don't have to rewrite the fact that there's a pellet stove or a gas fireplace. Unless it's a freestanding that you're worried is not going to stay, you don't have to rewrite it. It's there. It's predetermined. Because, okay, who remembers what is chattel and what is? See, I'm going to test you guys. I'm going to make you come back to
Chattel is stuff that is not secure.
Correct. And so, you know, but you're worried about what isn't secured is going to stay. And talking to the customer and making sure that everybody's on the same page. A big one is mounting brackets for a TV. Do they stay or do they go? What are your thoughts?
We've always taken off.
You're going to have this argument with the
Yeah.
customer, so.
Because they go with the TV. You wouldn't leave the whole thing, would you?
They can go.
You can go.
What's that?
Said unless you include it, they can go.
Right, but who ensures that the holes are filled
I
correctly?
was gonna say, they leave big holes.
So technically, it's permanently attached because it's bolted to the wall. So it's an argument both ways because it isn't specific to the TV. It's not a part of the TV that came together. It's a separate mounting bracket.
Think
But
about any
size.
TV.
Right, so make sure you're thinking of those things. The more TVs that you're seeing mounted on the walls or even the projectors, things like that, it could be considered permanently attached. I had one house, you'll love this, that the lag bolt was big enough that it went through the wall and came out on the other side. Like, I think you really bolted this down and now you're really not gonna move it because that's gonna make a heck of a mess and I wanna know how you're gonna fill it. So, but think of those things when you're talking about what stays and what doesn't stay when you're looking through the house. You don't want to get there the day of closing to do your walkthrough buyer was assuming that was gonna stay because they see that it is attached. They know the TV doesn't stay, but they're expecting that mounting bracket for 60 or $100 or depending on the size of the TV isn't there. And you're headed out to go buy a mounting bracket to have it installed before closing.
Mhm.
So those are pieces that you want to think about for these two sections. These two sections are probably one of the biggest areas that are fought over during a transaction, is what stays and what doesn't go,
But
what
now,
doesn't stay.
aren't you supposed to put things that aren't attached, aren't they supposed to go on a separate bill of sale and not on there?
So it depends. There's a couple of different foods for thought on that. If you're going to do a VA loan, all you want on here is your typical items that are included. Stove, refrigerator, dishwasher, basics. If you're getting into hot tubs, mounting brackets, TVs, things like that, there is a document that is called bill of sale, which says that everything is transferring at closing for no value. It is a good thing to use. Just remember that you don't forget to mark it off when you do your walkthrough to make sure all those items are still there and that everybody signs for it. So it's a good document to use. Just make sure you're remembering it. A lot of people forget about that form when they go to closing because they only turn this part over into the lenders. So, but yes, that is a good way to do it because there's also more space. And the reason you have the bill of sale is because is there a value to those items? If a hot tub stayed, is that kind of a value to the house? Depending on the hot tub. Let's face that. There are some that I'm like, yeah, no, you should take it. Please. And so the reason that they say put them on a bill of sale free with no value attached is because otherwise the appraiser on his appraisal has to say hot tub minus $500 and they have to give a value to it. So that's the purpose of the bill of sale. So they know what's transferring and that there isn't a number. If you remember when Detroit had its issues and values in Michigan were going down so fast, they were dropping like 20 and 30% per day. People were giving Mercedes-Benz for you to buy their house. And you could only get 70% of the value of the house that the price you were paying. So they were giving Mercedes-Benz and things, and the appraisers came back and said, whoa, there's a value to that car. That's not free. That's a $100,000 car. You're enticing them, so there's a value. So then it came off the value, or the price of the house, for what they could get the loan for, and it was just a mess. So then the bill of sale came out. That's when that form came about. So lenders prefer to see very clean, basic things on here, just your basic items. Leased or rented property, water softeners, water conditioners, propane tanks, satellite dishes, any of that type of stuff. That's what you're going to mark here, knowing that it becomes the buyer's responsibility to make arrangements to transfer those. You need to find out how much it is going to cost them, what are the terms, things like that. And you're going to get that from the other agent. You're not making the phone calls yourself. You're going to get that from the other side. So our purchase agreement amount. So let's just say our offer is $650,000. Right? And then you have $650 there, and then what is your earnest money? Now this section down here is fairly new and gets forgotten a lot of times. So this is a way out for your buyer if you don't fill this in correctly. So they're either all cash or they're going to get financing. So our offer is $650, we have $5,000 earnest money. So our balance due, however it's going to get there, is $645,000 at closing. So we're going to do additional cash down because we know we're getting a conventional mortgage. So you're either going to ask your customer, how much money are you putting down dollar-wise, or we know that as a minimum, a conventional loan is 5% down. So what we're doing when we're writing an offer is we're telling them the truest picture of our offer. What are we trying to do? We're trying to, impress the seller, number one, right? That's like the big piece is we want to talk to them about, hey, we want to buy your house, but we want to do it for a lot less. So we want to tell them, hey, we're bringing a lot of money in. We're not bringing a lot of money in. Maybe he tells you that, no, I'm going to put down $300,000. It is your job to verify that that money is there. You wrote this. So if he tells you it's $300,000 and at closing, there's only $100,000, does You need to do an addendum that corrects this. Because otherwise the documents do not match up with what we said we were gonna do. And somebody can come in and say, I never said I was putting $300,000 down. I'm only putting 100. Wait, those numbers don't equate, it doesn't work. So do some checking, talk to your lenders. Not always can you talk to your lender before you're writing the offer. Write it to the best of your ability and then do an addendum or an amendment to correct these things. This section down here, I like to actually put buyer is with, we'll use Mike Banks since he taught class today. Wow, 218. Bank, buyer is a. Boy, I don't like this keyboard. For a 7-1 conventional arm. So, and you could put at the rate of 2.75. As the rates are starting to fluctuate a little bit more, your buyer can walk if they can't qualify at a 3% interest rate, right? It's financing, it's a financing condition. So you're protecting your buyer when our rates become volatile by putting in as much information here as possible. Anything that deals with financing goes in this section. And you want to tell them as much as you can without tipping your whole hand and saying, oh yeah, we can go to $695 or whatever the list price is. Closing date, for those that have worked on transactions, you know that we're typically 30 to 45 days. Depending on the type of loan, depending on the lender, is going to depend on how much time that's there. I see a lot of people writing in here a 30-day close, and there's no physical way for it to be a 30-day close. It's great to do it because it makes your offer look good because you're up against somebody, but don't paint a picture that we can't make happen because it just gets everybody upset, especially your buyer and seller. Now, talk to your lender, maybe they can, and depending on your lender, depends on if they're gonna make it or not. Then you have the number of days, so if something happens on this day that we can't make it to closing, this extends our buy-sell for an additional number of days, typically 5 or 10 days, to accommodate delays attributable solely to third-party financing. It doesn't mean just because your lender, Opportunity Bank, didn't make their closing date. It means that you were using NeighborWorks, you were using Rural Development, you were using a First and Second. One of the other loans does not have their stuff there. So third-party lender is a secondary person, a secondary lender. Possession, closing date, when everything's signed or when it's recorded. So talk to them, find out which one's better, which one fits their needs better. This is your earnest money section. So right now, with all the stuff that's happened with COVID, we're seeing where title company, well, I should ask, do both of your offices deposit earnest money at title companies, right? I know yours does. Do you guys?
Yeah.
Okay, she doesn't hold any of the earnest money herself? Okay, so prior, the brokerages used to hold the earnest money. So we would get the checks and we would hold them and do everything ourselves. Well, prior to COVID, the title companies would come and pick up the earnest money. You just call them and tell them to come pick it up. And you'd give them a copy of their buy-sell, things like that. Well, number one, and we're gonna fix this, where it says cash, they can't take cash. Because they have to be able to verify the funds. Well, if you walked in with $5,000 in cash, somebody's gonna think you just did some drug deal. So you're either going to do a check. If you mark the word check, please make sure that you have the check in your hand when you do that. Because if you don't do it, and you've told the other side that I have a check for $5,000 and they ask me for a copy of it and I can't produce it, I'm liable. I've just told the seller something that isn't true. Have we painted the truest picture of what we're doing? No. So typically, because we do not hold earnest money in our offices anymore, usually you're gonna mark other and say, how is the earnest money going to be delivered? And because of COVID, title companies aren't coming to our offices to pick up as much. They're asking for the monies to be deposited, dropped off in their drop boxes, things like that. So, or to be wired. make sure you put that. Earnest money to be delivered to title company within 48 hours of written acceptance, or will be wired. Like, give yourself an either or, depending, or talk to your person. If your person doesn't live here, they're probably gonna wire it. So the more things that you put in place to keep you from having to be responsible for that $5,000, the better. So then if you actually are in receipt of it, you'll sign it. If you're not in receipt of it, you'd make a note on the buy-sell that just says buyer delivered directly. So everybody knows why. Auditor comes in, and I say, let me see your file from 2020 in April. And I open up your folder and there's no signature for earnest money. And there's no note as to what happened to that earnest money. You're gonna get a violation from the auditor because you have no documentation of what happened with that earnest money. And you're gonna, first thing, if you're there, you're gonna say, well, they delivered it directly to the title company. Yeah, but that doesn't say that. That says that they had an option, but what did they do? And you don't have a copy of your earnest money showing it was deposited. So you become the one in trouble. Deposit of earnest money, you can either, of course, what does state law say? How many days do we have to deposit it?
I'm not answering stuff. I'm not answering.
3 days.
3 days.
3 days? 3 business days or 3 days?
Business days.
Correct. So,
And Saturday's a business day, right?
correct. So if you think back to your test, is it 3 business days upon acceptance or receipt of the earnest money?
Acceptance.
Receipt.
Is it receipt?
Technically, the statute says you will deposit earnest money within 3 business days of receipt. Well, we can't deposit earnest money because we don't have an accepted transaction. So that's just a trick question.
Oh, thanks.
Hey, anytime.
But yet now,
So you're
but
either
you
gonna
wrote
put
48
3 here.
hours.
Yeah, you could either put it, what, 48 hours for what? Oh, that's for them to get it to the title company.
Oh, okay.
Now we have to deposit it.
Oh,
That's
gotcha,
just to
gotcha.
get it there.
Okay.
So we're either gonna put 3 business days in here or 3 business days after receipt by title company. And the reason that you say something along those lines is because when this first started at title company started holding earnest money, they just threw it in the cabinet, or they threw it in the file, and they weren't depositing it. Well, we're still liable because we said, our statute says we have to do da-da-da-da. So then, now we have to put it on the title company. You gotta deposit that money when you get it, open a file, and just deposit it. So make sure you're making a note of when it's going to be put there. You'll see in MLS that it says what title company they want to use. The preference is who the seller has. If your customer has a friend or a family member that works at another one, call the other agent and see if it can be switched. It's not a hard and fast rule as to who you have to use. It's typically who, as they used to say, it's who argues the most. But yeah, you can put down, you can either say seller's choice, to be determined, Chicago Title, First American, Mountain, whatever you want to do. Of course, this just gets into all the financing stuff. We're just going to skim through some of these things. I'm going to try to hit more of the big notes as to what makes a difference in these forms. Property inspections. This is huge because this is where a lot of deals fall apart and people get mad at each other. You're not an expert in any of this. Your job is to ensure that the right people are there for the buyer. Please don't give your opinion as to if something's right or not, because the moment they think different or the moment something goes wrong, they're gonna go, well, you didn't say that was a problem. Rely on your home inspector, rely on your appraisers, your contractors, hire somebody else to look at that. Because one of the other things that says in our code of ethics is to stay in your lane. That's the short version. So don't cross that line. If you don't know it, if you're not licensed in it, don't go there. Go to the people that are. Doesn't mean you're not gonna have an opinion, doesn't mean that you're not gonna kind of be in the back of your mind going, I think that guy's full of it. Let's call another person for a second opinion. But that's your job because you're protecting your customer. So but just be careful what you say or don't say when it comes to that stuff. So this is a contingency, and a contingency is a way out for a buyer. Not so much for a seller, but for a buyer. So the buy-sell is written to benefit the buyer, not the seller. The seller has few ways out, short of just saying no from the beginning. It's not an easy way for them to get out during the transaction. So this agreement is contingent upon the buyer doing any and all inspections they deem necessary and accepting the terms or negotiating. So it used to be that we marked boxes for all this stuff. Now that you do want to mark this box up here, right there. But this is just it's not an all-inclusive list. This is just a typical list of the more common inspections that people see. So it doesn't mean the buyer has to do every single one of these. It's just these are options. Most of it is covered by the home inspection. Make sure you're getting your property disclosure statement from the seller before you finalize your inspection results. If you want specific information here, so you can fill in what the lot size has to be, things like that. So now the dates. This is probably a section that gets very confusing for realtors and for customers. Basically, the easy way to explain this is the first date on line 176 is, this is the date that the inspection will be completed by and notification handed over to the listing agent of our questions, concerns, and problems or termination. Or just plain acceptance. We're good with it the way it is. We're not going to ask for anything. So that has to be done by 5 p.m. that day. So when you're backing up, when you're writing these and you're writing your dates in there, think of how much time your customer is going to need to think about it. So if our home inspections are 2 weeks out, you might need to give yourself a few extra days here because your customer might be a person that's a thinker. Like, you don't want to rush them through what they're going to ask for on that inspection. Sometimes you want to because you don't want them to think about it too much, but you have to kind of keep in mind on how they think and how they've been processing through looking at houses and what's their questions. So what you're going to do then on this date is, this is the day you're going to actually write out what's called your inspection notice. Page 1 is, what did we all find wrong? Page 2 is, what do we want the seller to fix, whether financially or them to physically fix it. Please remember, you cannot ask a seller to fix something that isn't broken. Just because the furnace is 40 years old does not mean you can ask for a new one. You ask for an HVAC person to come in and evaluate it, repair or replace as required. Put it on somebody else. Don't make that your thing that was the reason why it died because you wanted a new furnace for your customer. Not our place. It's working. It probably will work for another 50 years. Because if you look at the house, it might be a 1,000 square foot house and it's not used much. It's an efficient house. You know, it's like there's a lot of things that come into play. So rely on your home inspectors and ask for somebody else that is in that field to do that inspection. So first date is the day that you have your inspection completed by, no later than, and notice given to the other agent. Day 2 here on line 186 is the date that we have to negotiate it by. Don't give yourself 24 hours. Make sure you're giving yourself a couple of days. So typically if I say I'm gonna have my notice given to the seller by June 5th, 5 p.m., I'm gonna ask for another week for us to negotiate it, and that's what's built in here. So if you're on the listing side, that does not mean on June 10th is the day that you respond at 5 o'clock, because you totally lost the negotiation between everybody. It happens because we're trying to get roofers, we're trying to get plumbers, we're trying to get people in there, but be cognizant of these dates and move that second one out if you think it's not gonna work, whether you're the listing side or the buyer side. If you get to June 13th and you haven't heard from me as the listing agent, you might want to reach out and say, hey, where are we at? Do we need to do an extension to give everybody more time? Some sellers just get it all done and they haven't even told their agent and they're trying to figure it out, and then all of a sudden on the 15th it's signed, it's done. You're like, but that's not what I wanted. I wanted to know where we were before that so you can move it forward. So be real careful of these 2 days. Give yourself enough time, but also really watch this. Scenario that just happened, had an agent, she gave notice the day after the due date on line 176. Didn't think anything of it. Thought she had, in her mind, she got the dates out far enough. The home inspector got in on, let's just say yesterday, which was actually the day the inspection notice was due. Listing agent let the inspector in, so they knew that nobody had been there yet. Day after gives the notice, the buyer's agent and the listing agent end up in an argument over it because the listing agent says, I don't have to do anything on this, which is true. They don't have to present it. You've missed your deadlines. You're moving your buyer forward. We got it worked out, but it was a disagreement. So don't be the person that just comes back and says absolutely not. If you're close to that first date and you haven't heard from your buyer's agent, please call them. Where are we at? What are we doing? I haven't seen the home inspector in yet. Are we doing an inspection? Do we need to, especially, you know, coming as a new agent for you guys, think of how that is down the road and how other realtors have treated you when you're asking a question or you're moving a deadline or something. Think of that on that opposite side. Remember that and help those other ones also. And even those of us that are more older and senile and forget more dates than we remember. So
Season.
season, that's what it is.
Season.
Yeah. So do watch these dates. These can cause you a lot of headaches and it could lose your buyer an option out. So make sure you're watching those. Financing, of course, all the way through the day of closing. Appraisal, there's a lot of questions about this section right here because there's two boxes. So the first one says the property must appraise for at least the purchase price. And then or you can put a specific dollar amount. It has to appraise for $155,000. The problem if you put $155,000 here and you forget to change that line when you counter somebody, you might have just boxed yourself into a corner. So that's where those seasoned agents mark the purchase price, whatever that end number is. That's what we want it to appraise for. And then you want to put in number of days. This is the number, if the appraisal doesn't come in or there's a dispute, then this is the days that we have to figure out how to fix it. Of course, as the buyer's agent, we don't want to dispute the appraisal. We like the newer number because it's usually less. The listing agent is going to be working their tail off trying to get a higher price. Doesn't mean that we don't help them, but it's just one of those that you can put in here. If you have specific days, this agreement is contingent upon property appraising for at least purchase price or a dollar amount, and this one actually has a release date. This scenario, I would say I would use if I'm a little leery of my customers' financing, i.e. we're using Quicken Loans, and I want to know that we're not going to go beyond their days. Because the lenders are supposed to go by the days in our buy-sell also. Or I'm a little leery about where they're getting their extra money from. Like they're telling me their down payment money, they're talking to me about those things, but they're not, like I don't feel as confident. And so I might put a little bit stricter deadline on them and putting that a date in there and saying it needs to be appraised 10 days before closing. So we know where we stand. So most of the time you'll use this upper box, you won't use the second one, but it is there. Title contingency, you have so many days to review it once you receive it. Please read them. You can find a lot of problems in those, a lot of issues. That's how we found that the legal description was wrong on one. Funny story, I had one of my sellers are selling their house. On his title commitment, it said that he had a divorce decree, he was paying child support. Well, I know he's married, I've seen her. Like she's been at all the appointments. So we're sitting down, I'm going through the title commitment with them, and I said, now on here it says that you have to pay child support. Holy cow, you want to talk about fireworks. Oh my goodness. She was ticked, he was ticked. Well, they remarried each other. She thought he had a kid with somebody else and was paying child support all these years. He was like, why is that on? I just remarried her. That should go away. Divorce decrees do not come off of your record as far as going against the house. Quite an interesting afternoon at the office. I'm like, I don't know how to tell you this, but this says, you know, because what you have to do if there's a divorce decree and there's child support, you have to provide an affidavit. We're helping our customers get that information, and the title companies are telling us, so we can help get it in advance. So I'm like, so I need something that says that you've been paying her. And he's like, she's right here. And it just went off. It was not a good experience, let me tell you. So you do have some really awkward positions with your customers when you're reading those and you're going, oh, maybe I'll just send this to them and say, could you please look at number 15? Tell me what that is. And a lot of people think that once they get remarried or the kids are 18 years old, it falls off. It doesn't. It's there. It will always be there because it's something that was on there when they searched, when title searched for them, that it was a problem against their history. Doesn't mean we can't fix it. Just, you know. So do read those. They're kind of fun sometimes. What's really fun is when you see them and they have like patents back to Ma Bell and utility easements back to like the way old utility companies. And you're like, who was that? Oh, that one. That was like 1918. That was, and it's just because they were always there, so they'll always post them on every title clear. So there's some fun stuff. Insurance contingency. So this one is ensuring that the buyer, once they get their insurance quote, can still qualify for the house. Had a gentleman the other day that he calls for his insurance. His insurance company decided that they were going to underwrite all of the losses against the property from flooding, like just from water damage, against the new buyer. Normally that doesn't happen. There are a couple insurance companies that rate the new buyer against any claim against that house. Usually it just follows the seller and it goes away and it's just notated there. So he couldn't qualify. The rate was too high for him, so he no longer qualified for the house. So this is a good contingency. You want to make sure that they're checking on their lending early. Lead-based paint, everybody knows lead-based paint stuff. This is where you're writing in contingencies. Somebody has a house to sell, somebody has to view it. Right now, we're seeing a lot of buyers coming in that have yet to view the property. That's what this is, you know, contingent upon buyer physically viewing the home, not just doing it via a Zoom call or FaceTime or whichever. Additional provisions, if there's other information we need to let them know. Here's where I put my clause. I'll show you the video. So you're in this section, you got to click this one, and then this box right up here is your clause. And then the one I want is closing costs. So this is just where I list out who pays what. But this is where you would put those weird clauses like the COVID clause, another house to sell, different things that your buyer is related to the list or the buyer's agent, things like that. So this is something that I created many years ago. I've always liked it because then I know that we've talked about what closing costs are for each side. Conveyance. So who knows what types of warranties there are besides for general? What other kind of warranties are out there on a house when you transfer it? Like, it's late, it's 10, I'm done. So you have a general warranty, which is typical, which means that the title is warranted and guaranteed that it's clean. They've searched it, there's no problems. It is an arm's length transaction. You've sold the property to you. There's no attachments, there's no weird things that are saved on there. If you are buying a foreclosure, it's a special warranty deed, which means that they never physically owned it. They bought a piece of paper in foreclosure when they took the house back. They have no idea. Yes, they have check title, but they do not guarantee the title. They guarantee that transfer to them. You also have a sheriff's deed, which is when they're selling it at the sheriff's sale or they're taking it back for other reasons. So those are your typical 3 ones. Usually you're going to do a general warranty deed, which just means it's clean. If you have a manufactured home, you're going to fill all that in. Water rights. So water rights typically are not going to be an issue unless you're outside of town. Make sure you're paying attention to what's there. So if you're on a rural piece of property, verifying if there's a well, is it shared? Do we have to pay a certain portion? Do we have irrigation from an irrigation district? What's going on and who's gonna pay for the transfer of it and who's gonna complete the transfer? There is a water right ownership form, disclosure form within your forms documents that actually makes sure that everybody understands the title company will transfer everything that's available. But there are some old water rights out there that are not even valid. If you're curious if there is a water right on a property, you can go onto the DNRC and you can look it up by geocode, by name. Geocode's simpler than by name because it doesn't say, hey Sharon, it's right here. It gives you this map and says, hey, we're somewhere in this quadrant. So geocode takes you right to the exact code that you're looking for. Mineral rights, typically there are no mineral rights that transfer, especially when it's a city lot, there's nothing. State of Montana does not go back and search for mineral rights. You can pay somebody, so if you're doing a big farm or ranch deal or a commercial land deals of some form, you might want to check into that and have somebody pay for that, but it's expensive. If everybody's passed away, those rights revert back to the state, is the way I understand it. So just know that if there are any, it's going to be on the title commitment when you get it. The other agent should know. So if you're dealing with big parcels of land, that's one of those inspections that you're going to do. Closing fees. So this is different than your closing cost. Closing fee only covers the fee to use the title company. This has nothing to do with recording fees and title searches and things like that. So you will see some realtors mark seller pays them, buyer pays them, equally shared. That's only that one fee. It's $600, $300 each side. Sometimes there are discounts for them, but just know that that has nothing to do with the rest of the fees. That's only that item.
Except isn't that the one VA doesn't? Is that the one?
Correct. So when you're doing, you are correct. When you're doing a VA loan in Montana, the veteran buyer cannot pay their closing fee. So then you would mark seller paid.
Yeah.
So that'd be the only time that you would mark. Well, you can mark it anytime, just it's part of your negotiation. But under a VA loan, the veteran buyer cannot pay it, but the veteran seller can.
Oh, I suppose if you had two veterans, then you need to be in a
So then the realtor's paying it.
Right, no problem.
So of course, title insurance, condition of title, free and clear. One of the things I suggest to new agents right now is when you get a transaction going and it's your buyer, go sit with that lender if you haven't already. Find out what it is that they're expecting from you. Find out what you need to give them. How does their process work? Get to know that. So real estate is a relationship event. So get to know that lender, whether you can sit down in person with them or you can call them or you can Zoom call them, any of those things. Spend some time to find out how this process works. It's going to build your knowledge for down the road. What are we doing? What kind of programs are we using? What do you need from me? What can I expect from you? Find those things out. Same thing in talking to the title company. When you take it over to a title company and deposit earnest money, ask for a few minutes of their time. What happens? I don't know if they've had an Eagle Academy over at First American lately, which is where they kind of go through what the process is. But it's nice when you have a transaction in hand to say, okay, now what happens? Like, I get the basics, but now what do you do? What is your part in this? What is your part? How does that relate to me? What should I be looking for? They will go through that title commitment with you when you get it. So your first couple, if you don't have somebody readily available to review it with you, call the title company and ask them to review that with you. So you understand what's there and what you need to be watching for. It's going to help your knowledge base for all transactions down the road. 1031 tax exchange, anybody know what those are?
Trading properties.
What's that?
Just trading properties.
Basically trading your, it's trading your tax issue between properties. So if I am selling one and I have a capital gain, I'm just moving it to a different property. So I don't have to pay my tax bill until later, till I die and the kids can deal with it. And you know, they're interesting to do. They're kind of fun because we don't do anything. We just send the paperwork to the 1031 company and we just make sure everybody goes to closing. Kind of nice that way. Special improvement district fees. What are these? Who knows? SIDs or RIDs? Special improvement district fees or rural improvement district fees. These are capital improvements that the city or the county do to the property that you're living at or along the street or things like that. And if you're in town, it's an SID. And that's where the city comes and knocks on your door and says, so we're replacing the sidewalks out there, but your portion of that bill is $5,000. Pay out. Or included in your property taxes. Amortized for the next 10 years and you'll pay for them over the next 10 years. The reason that this is a big deal is because that can cost the seller or the realtor that misses it a lot of money at the day of closing, because if there are any SIDs or RIDs, you're either asking them, if you're the buyer's agent, you're going to say you want the seller to pay them off and you're going to pick up anything down the road. If you're the seller, they're going to come back and go, you get them, but they should have disclosed them. It should be within your MLS information. It should be on your tax records. Look for those, make sure that you don't get stuck, because they can be a pretty hefty bill. Typically, the only time you're seeing those are in newer construction subdivisions. You don't see them very often in an existing subdivision, unless somebody came in and paved the alley. The neighborhood got together and said, we want our alleys paved, and everybody just chipped in and put it on their tax bill. When they added water out Upper River Road, right, that became an RID. And in fact, when they did Fox Farm Road, that became an RID for those property owners. So, and it's something that as a listing agent, you need to know because you need to disclose it. So association special assessments, that's gonna deal more with like condos, things like that, where there's a homeowners association. Roof needs to be replaced. We didn't have enough money in the fund. So everybody's association fees have been increased for X amount of money for a certain period of time. That's what those two sections are. You want to make sure you're checking those before you write your buy sells. Or if you don't know and you have no way to get a hold of anybody, mark paid off by seller at closing. Make it a negotiation item so you know where you stand. Proration of taxes, propane. So heating fuel or propane. This is a big one when you're dealing with rural property. Buyer owes what's in that tank at closing. So right before closing, typically 7 days before closing, you need to have somebody go out and check the level and make sure that bill is at closing so that everybody can get reimbursed for it. Hopefully the seller didn't just fill it, 1,000-gallon tank, and your buyer's going, I don't have that money. So that's where you want to know kind of where that's sitting. Excuse me, that's a newer addition to our buy sells. Condition of property. Another point of contention a lot of times. It has to be at least the same condition other than normal wear and tear. So buyer or seller can't be staying in the house after they get the offer written and just damage it. Put holes in the walls, scuff the hardwood floors, break windows, things like that. It has to at least stay in the showable condition it was when they made the offer on the house. The question always becomes, what is, because you'll see on line 340, seller agrees to leave the property in broom clean or better condition. Everybody's broom clean is different. It does not mean you have to eat off the floors or off the toilet. It is broom clean. Would you like it to be nicer? Yes. Do you instruct your seller for it to be nicer? Yes. But our version of clean might be different than somebody else's. So we have to be cognizant with what people have issues with. That's where it's nice, hopefully, that you can see the house before the morning of closing and make sure that the house is in appropriate condition for what your buyer is going to be comfortable with. Otherwise, we're scrambling trying to find cleaners an hour before closing. So be careful of that one. It is a bone of contention a lot of times. Typically, if you can, you want to do your walkthrough 24 hours before closing. And that's making sure the items that are supposed to stay are gonna stay, the house is clean, and everybody's ready to go. There's no new damage that you didn't know before. Noxious weeds, Megan's Law. Everybody understand what Megan's Law is? Violent sexual offender ruling. Buyer has the right to find out if there's any in the immediate area. I try to caution the buyer to do this during the same time as their inspections. don't wait till the end. Just because that can be one of those that's tough to have to figure out if you're moving forward or not. Had a gal who made an offer on a house, did her inspection, calls it in. And this is a house that in the alley, the garages like met each other basically. So when one garage door was open, the other one you could see directly into them. And she finds out that there's a violent offender across the alley. She's a single parent, little girl, worried, like just worried to death about this. So we did a little bit more research. Well, come to find out, the guy that was across the alley got in a bar fight. So he's on the violent offender for the rest of his life. Not necessarily something that is a reason to withdraw. So if the customer comes to you with one of those concerns, walk through, figure out what it is. Our job is not to escalate the situation. Our job is to ensure that they're comfortable. How do we move from here? We want to be the one that says, okay, let's talk through this. Let's figure this out. I get it. I understand. But now we need to know, because now we have a small bit of information that's going to affect us down the road. So now we need to know the rest of the information, whether that person buys that house or not. We need to understand what happened and why are they on that list. So just make sure you're giving yourself enough time to verify that. And you do not check it for them. They have to do their own checking. Because once you know, you have to disclose, right? Unless you've done all your research, I don't even look. I don't even want to know. I'm like, go ahead, come to my house. Might hurt you. Radon, that's part of your inspections. New construction is a whole different section. It has its own buy-sell. Buyer and seller remedies. So the short version is everybody says yes here. And we're going through closing, and all of a sudden somebody decides to withdraw for one reason or the other. You can either sue for specific performance, you can sue for damages. So if you're the seller side and you did a bunch of work specific to that buyer and the buyer's walking, you can come back and say, you owe me all the money that I did to put this house together the way you want it. If you're the buyer and the seller change their mind, had that happen once in 20 years, it's kind of interesting. Then you can go back to the seller and say, you owe me for my appraisal and my home inspection. So you do have remedies for both sides. You know, we each can sue each other. That's the easy way of saying it. Everybody certifies that everybody's 18 years of age or older, sound mind, legally competent. If you're concerned about something from the beginning, see if somebody else is going to be along on the transaction. Young kids, you know, 18, 19 years old, sometimes you're asking, was anybody coming to look at the house with you? Anybody else helping with that decision? So think through who else, like if it was your own kids or if there was something that, not that we're stereotyping anybody, but it's just that keep in mind if maybe somebody else should be involved in the transaction. That keeps you out of hot water in a lot of ways. I can tell you stories about that one. If they are a corporation, so they are saying it's a partnership, make sure you look at that partnership first. See who can sign. You need to get a copy of what I call their charging documents, which gives permission to one or both or three or however many people need to sign on this document. So make sure you're looking for any of that. If somebody's signing as a power of attorney, ask for a copy of that power of attorney. You want to see that before you start sending people to sign things. Foreign person or entity, aliens, that goes into a whole different section. Talk to the title company about that. Consent to disclose, this gives us the ability to talk to everybody we need to. Wire fraud. Everybody understands about the wire fraud, right? And what's going on out there. Do not give out any wiring instructions. Put your customer with the title company, put the lender with the customer. Don't touch it. Don't ask it to come to you. Let them deal with it. I've actually gone back to telling people, bring a check. Go to the bank and get a certified check. If you need somebody to walk with you, I'll come with you. But wiring is scary right now with everything that's going on because I don't know if you guys have heard, but those funds are not federally insured when they disappear. So because the wiring instructions went, somebody intercepted it and changed a number. And when they're gone, they're gone. FBI can't get it. It's just a mess. So I had somebody write a big check the other day. I'm like, go get a check, please. I don't want to see that money gone. Like, yikes.
But how would you do that? I mean, I'm thinking of like my own personal, when I bought my house, it didn't come from, and it was a large check. It didn't come from a checking account. It came from an investment.
Investments are different because investments will work directly with the title.
So those are
It's not
safe.
coming to you first and then you sending it to title.
No, it went from investment to title.
Right.
And that's
So
safe?
those two are talking. It's still not necessarily safe, but it's coming in, it's those two direct. So I have one that's doing an investment right now that's moving it, and the investment banker said, I won't send you the money. I will send it directly to the title company, and I don't know if they're insured on that, and that's why, but they said we don't send it to anybody other than directly to the title company.
Yeah, that's what I was told too. That was the
Yeah.
only way you could do it.
So it's not FDIC insured, but it might be insured by the investment broker, that company of some form. That part, it's a good question to ask on the classes when we're talking about those at one of the association meetings.
Yeah.
So something to think about, because I never thought about that one until today. Risk of loss assumed by the seller. Something happens, hot water heater breaks, window breaks, things like that. It's on the seller. They have to return it to same condition as of the day that you wrote the offer. Time is of the essence. That's simple. This agreement's binding upon everybody's heirs. Attorney fees, all parties pay their own attorney fees. Commissions paid by the seller or buyer at closing. Electronic signatures, we don't see very many faxes anymore. But counterparts are everything. So that's this copy plus any other copy. So tell your customers, do not get rid of anything. Once we get to closing, you should have one final copy of everything, because there are some pages that you'll have multiple of, and there's nothing changed. Earnest money disputes. So everybody's moving along and buyer decides to withdraw for whatever reason. Appliances are marginal, financing fell apart, whatever it is, you have to do a withdrawal in writing. It's not just a matter of, oh, hey, yeah, we're not gonna do this anymore, I'm gonna give back the money. You can't do that. If your earnest money is held at the title company, they wanna see the termination and they wanna see the disbursement of earnest money form. So the disbursement of earnest money form is signed by both the buyer and seller, saying this is how the money is being distributed. Back to the buyer, back to the seller, part of it to the home inspector, part of it here or there. So make sure you're filling those out. If you're withdrawing for inspection reasons, on that form, it just says buyer elects to terminate. Nobody else has to sign it, but you still got to do the release of earnest money. So no matter what, you always have to do one additional form when you're terminating. And that's to protect everybody. And if they can't come to an agreement, then the money gets turned over to the court. And the court keeps 50% of it. If you got a $500 earnest money, and the buyer and seller are fighting over who gets it, really, they're each gonna get $125 when it's done. So do you just say, usually there's a reason, and it's very seldom does a buyer walk away just because. I haven't had one of those in a long time. Typically it's inspection or it's financing. I mean, financing all the way up to the day of closing. Like they have a way out. And that's why I say the buy sells are the benefit of buyer more than they are the seller. Additional forms that are attached. Lead-based paint, mold are typically your primary two. Contingency for the sale of buyer's properties. So these are all individual forms within your forms program. So if they need to be attached, please attach them. Please include the agent's license number. So by missing this line, you've actually voided this buy-sell. Everybody signs it. Because all lines aren't complete. If you don't know it, put NA, or put agent to provide, or something. Don't leave any blank lines if you can help it. Marking if you're a buyer or seller's agent, who's representing who, sorry. Seller's agent, buyer's agent. How long do they have to respond? So what do you think somebody should have to respond? In your mind, what's a good number? Number of days, number of hours?
24 hours.
24? That's very common. In this market, sometimes you'll see it a little bit faster. What I would suggest when figuring out what your buyer's commitment time frame is where's the seller? Do they live here? Is it 8 o'clock at night by the time I'm gonna get it to them? Am I really gonna get an answer by 10 a.m.? Because it took my customer all day long to sign the forms? So kind of keep that in mind as to who and what they are. If it's an elderly couple, if you ask for a fast response, you might not like the response. Typically, you find that they're wanting to think, want to look at it, they want to dissect it. They're not going to usually respond quickly. So think about that. As much as we want to push it to get the answer and get them under contract and get that house off the market so nobody else jumps in and we're not a multiple offer situation, think about all the parties involved. Where is everybody? What's going on? Talk to that other agent. Where are they at? What's happening for them? And then of course you have, everybody's going to sign. Buyer is either going, or seller is either going to accept it or modify it. If they modify it, you should be getting a written counteroffer. So it's a separate form, single page document that is just the counter form. I think it's a 2-page document now. Can you counter a counter? It's a trick question. No, you can't.
You do.
You know why? So when you counter a document, when we're going to counter this offer, so bear with me as I slide back up here to an area that we would counter. So typically when we're countering, we are countering specific lines, right? And they're all related to these lines. We're going to write on the counter that says change line 42 to say $669,000. And we're going to write it out. And then we're going to change line 44 because that changes that line. We're not necessarily going to change 47 and 48 because that's what they're saying they're putting down, right? We're on the seller side. We might change the closing date. We might change inspection days. We might add some things. Those are specific to this buy-sell. So if you counter a counter and you use the lines of the buy-sell, but we only change 1 or 2 things, what happens to the other lines that we changed in the counter? So we have our buy-sell. Counter offer number 1 says line 41, 44, 250, and 365. Now, you as the buyer's agent are going to come back and you're wanting to counter a counter. And you say line 41 and 44, what happened to the other 2 lines we changed? Right? Because now counter number 1 goes away. The only way you can counter a counter is if you address the lines on the counter, not on the offer. So on your counter offer, it's gonna be line number 2 says change line 41. So you would actually have to write on referencing counter number 1, change line da, which affects line 41 on the buy-sell. It's easier to write in the buy-sell. So technically, no, you cannot counter a counter. You shouldn't, because things get lost. Because what happens is both sides don't sign this counter. So nobody's ever actually agreed to counter number 1. You've changed counter number 2, but you didn't address all of the items that the buyer wanted to counter, or the seller countered in their counter. Does that make, like, it's confusing? So technically what should happen is if you write an offer, you get a counter, write a new offer. You got to change your dates anyways, because you're usually a day or 2 days off or 5 days off, depending on how long it's taking. So you should never do a counter to a counter. Does it happen? Yes. Are there realtors that are out there that will tell you to just counter it? Yes. Do you do it on your phone? Yes, but be very careful, and I don't suggest it. Because how does your customer say that sign for what you just forwarded them in a text or an email? I've had them where the systems are down and you're countering and you're working not through the transaction and you can't get into one of the 2 systems for whatever reason. Then what I do is have the customer, my person that I'm responding with, send me an email. It says in reference to the items we discussed as follows, and line out those items because it's their signature block on it. Do I still do our state forms? Yes, just because that's clean. Nothing says we have to use a state of Montana buy-sell or listing or counter offer forms. That is strictly for you. This is just a simple way to make sure you don't miss anything. That's what this is. And ensuring that we're not passing on information that we don't But your state statute says an offer can be on a bar napkin, as long as it is consummated at the end with financial and all parties agree. So be careful with that when you're going back and forth, because sometimes you get lost as to, wait, where were we? We started at this number, we changed this number, and then we added these items, and then we deleted those items, and we went with this price. So that's where they took out the counters and the counters and counters. Our counter offers used to have numbers on them. And what happened was lenders were missing pieces, because what went to the lender was the first buy, sell, and the last counter. But in between, there were pieces that were accepted. And so, yeah, it got really confusing. So preference is, don't do it. Okay, so any questions on buy, sell? Like, I know that's really fast to go through this, but that's one of your biggest documents, and we'll hit the listing agreement real quick too. Buyer broker forms. When do you sign your buyer broker form and your relationships form?
So you mean,
The day you meet your customer. Should always be talking about your relationships the day that you meet them before you walk through a house. Because when you walk through a house, if you're showing me a house and you do not have a buyer broker agreement with me, you represent the seller, not the buyer. So the only information you can give is what's on that MLS printout. You can't give your opinion, nothing like that, because you represent that seller. So what should happen in one of your first conversations, whether it's over the phone or in person on the first showing, is talking about how do we represent people. I know where they're at, you know, asking some questions like what's the purpose? Why are they buying? What have they looked at? You know, because inevitably somebody will say, no, I'm not working with anybody. Nope, you're good. And you go show them, okay, well, I'm gonna call my agent and have her write it up. Excuse me? I just came in on a holiday weekend because it's somebody in Descoulias's office. So they assume that it's your listing. So you guys are going to show it no matter what. It's the office listing, but they're working with you. And they're like, yeah, I'll call you and they'll take care of it for me. And you're like, I just spent 3 hours with you in a $40,000 house. I don't think so. So then it gets into a whole nother fight. So do this as early as you can. It does say that you are supposed to do it upon your first meeting because it lines out what are your requirements for them, what are your requirements that you're going to provide and what do you expect out of them, and where are we going? So you have 2 buyer broker agreements. One is a short form and one is the more detailed. Typically you'll see the short form because we're expecting that the seller is paying our commission. We're not asking the buyer for anything. The long form, I have heard a lot more offices are starting to use the long form because they're charging the buyers. If they're not, and there are some states where the buyer does pay a fee to use us and then we reimburse it. So they're either going to be a non-exclusive or an exclusive. Non-exclusive is typically like more of an investor. Like they're working with whoever brings them the deal. Doesn't mean that you're not signing it. Just means you're a little bit more guarded with what information that you're giving them to make sure that they're going to use you for that transaction, not somebody else. Exclusive, you do have to give a deadline. And then you have to say, what are we looking for? Don't be so specific that if they found a house outside of it, of what's here, you know, I want a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, chef's kitchen, must have a bathtub, must, and just goes through all these lines. And the house they end up buying is a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, shower only on a corner lot in a one-way. But that didn't say that they were okay with that. And they came back later and said, well, you forced me to buy this house. This isn't what I wanted. Look at this document that says this is what I wanted, which would be this document. So don't make it real tight, make it a pretty broad parameter so that you aren't like boxing yourself into something. Typically, you're gonna do a buyer broker agreement a lot of times for about 6 months. If it's an investor type, it might be a year because you're just doing longer term. Closings are longer, very specific type properties. Lead-based paint form. So this form has a lot of controversy. And part of it is because we've changed a few things. So you should be getting this form. If you're the buyer's agent, this form should come from the listing agent. It should be an MLS. It should just automatically pull over with the seller's disclosures on it. And they're going to tell you if they have any knowledge or any records pertaining to any lead-based paint. This section down here is where your buyer is going to initial. Lines 26, 27, and 30. Buyers receive copies of any information listed above. So there is some argument listed above in item B. There is an argument that says, well, if they're not providing anything, why do I have to initial? Well, you're initialing that says that they didn't have anything. Because you're saying that I've reviewed anything they've given me in letter B. Simple answer is just initial all three. The other one is give them the pamphlet. It is in your forms program. If they have not received one, you should give them one. Get permission from your brokerage to print it. It's 40 pages. Don't just hit print. But just make sure, depending what I don't know what your office situations are with paper and printing and if they're costs and stuff. You can go to EPA and order them and have booklets. The other one is the buyer's going to do one of the following. They're either going to have a 10-day risk assessment and bring the EPA in to test the house or the property, which then brings in a whole nother form, which is the lead-based paint contingency addendum, which has true deadlines in it, or they're going to waive it. So they do have to mark one of those two boxes.
Sharon, is there anywhere online that they can get that pamphlet?
You can email it to them.
You can, okay.
Yeah, that's why I say just don't print it
Yeah,
unless you have permission, but you can email it right from our forms program.
okay,
Because it is actually in the buyer's documents that you can just forward.
okay.
And if you're gonna do that, then I would suggest have them initial page one of it. Like put it into your packet of what you're gonna ask them to initial.
Okay,
And just, hey, emailed on this date. Please initial it, because then nobody can come back and say you never gave it. Does that make sense?
well, isn't that basically what that's saying, is that they did receive
It
it?
is, but it's amazing how many people go, I never saw that form.
Well.
You made me initial this,
Yeah,
especially if you're doing it online signing. We don't know if they've read it. They just click, 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 click.
right,
So have them initial it.
Okay.
That's what I do. It's like anything you can initial through a transaction, just initial it. It's just easier because the signing is simple. You know, you do them online. For so many people are doing them online.
yeah.
It's like it's there. You can attach as many forms and documents as you want, and going through them. Hopefully, you're spending the time to go through it with them. But then you're also just have them initial that they have received things.
Well, basically, when you send it to them, for them to e-sign, that's basically giving, that's two purposes. One, it shows they're getting it, and two, they've signed it.
But it doesn't say that they've read it or they understand what they read.
Well, that's their problem.
I know. But what I'll tell you what one of my pet peeves with doing online signing for everything is, who's sitting with the customer to talk through the transaction? Like just what we just did in 45 minutes.
No, I could see the difference because Jake and I have had two listings since I've been licensed. And the first one, we had to do it all over the phone. And then the second one, we did sitting down with them and I went through it. And it was way different, way different.
It is, and it's
Yeah.
fine, you know, so if you're gonna do it online, set up a Zoom, set up a FaceTime or a Skype or whatever, and walk through, or just talk to them on the phone. Walk through the highlights of the documents.
Yeah,
Just because you're sending it to them does not, we know, do we read everything that we get that we just hit click, 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 click? Probably not. So we read probably a quick review of it, but there are some things, this is tying them into buying one of the largest items in their life, unless they're buying Lamborghinis every day. So make sure they understand. That is part of your job, is to make sure that they understand what they're doing. And you may have to go through it 3 or 4 times. You may have to send it to them because we're in a time crunch. Okay, now come in tomorrow. Let's go through this. At least one time, you gotta go through all of it with them so they understand what they're doing. And they feel like the money that we get paid, we've earned. That's why a lot of people think realtors are just overpaid, because we do it, we show them, we're in there 20 minutes, we write up an offer, we send it to them, we talk to them when it's time for inspection notice, and maybe we've got 5 hours into it. And we just got a check for $4,000 or $5,000. You see why people think that we're overpaid and they want to negotiate our commissions? Give them a reason to feel like you're not paid enough, because of your communication with them, how you're going through this. Take pride in what you're doing and putting out there for people to see. And they're going to tell the next friend and the next friend and the next friend and go, you know what? I'm going to get her a $500 gift card because she really took care of me, or he really took care of me. They know we got paid well, but they think we went above and beyond what we did. That's what you want. You want them to be the neatest experience that they've ever had. I always look at real estate as a teacher. We're teaching them how to buy and sell. How do we want that transaction to be next time? How do we want to be treated? If you think of some of the things that you, whether you've bought and sold houses before, look back, how was your real estate transaction? Did that realtor talk to you after closing? Was there a problem? Was there issues? Was the other realtor a pain? Was the seller a pain? Use that in how you're going to build how your business is going to be. Be better than what you would want somebody to do for you. Go that next step. Be that super realtor that everybody's looking for, that's going to go above and beyond. So that's my soapbox about just doing these forms online, because I do end up talking to a lot of realtors, even for my own agents, that go, well, they didn't explain it to me. Well, I can say, well, okay, so you had so-and-so as your realtor before. I know you understand. You just didn't like what they said, so you moved on to a different realtor. Or that's a newer realtor. They may not know totally. And I'm sure they explained it, but maybe not in a way that you get it. So then we're explaining it a different way. So it helps you to understand how you need to respond to other people when somebody does ask you a question and you know they already know. They just didn't like what they were told. Let's see, relationships form. So this one, the reason you're doing this up front is because it's talking about how you are representing each party. So of course, we're a seller's agent, always. That's who we represent, that's who pays us. Actually, the listing broker pays us, but it comes from the seller. But you are obligated to the buyer to talk about any adverse material facts. If you have signed a buyer broker agreement, then you become a buyer's agent. But you are also obligated to the seller to talk about any adverse material facts. An adverse material fact on the buyer side is money is coming from an investment account for their down payment. It's 15 days once we order it. We got to back those days up. We're not going to order it until the appraisal's done. Like thinking through those things, that's an adverse material fact, because if the seller can't wait beyond the date that you have in that inspection notice, that's a problem. Or not inspection notice, I'm sorry, in the buy sell, that's a problem. That's an adverse issue with your transaction. Years ago, when people were filing bankruptcy, the bankruptcy discharges in 2 years, which is a month away. Will you wait for our bankruptcy to discharge, get our requalification done, and then close? We're 90 days out. Will the seller wait? Another one is sets of orders right now. You got a lot of people that are sitting on pins and needles on if they're coming in on a set of orders or leaving on a set of orders. So that's an adverse material fact. It needs to be a contingency in your buy sell if they're waiting for their orders. I had heard they were moved till September. Now I heard they've been moved up, but who knows what's going to happen with those folks. So make sure you're protecting that and telling everybody, where are the concerns? Where are the problems? If you're the listing side and the seller orders might get canceled, are they going to sell their house? What are they going to do? Are they going to move on base? What's next? Like, what are those issues? Dual agency. And I think everybody does dual agency, not just dual agent. I think both your brokerages do. So everybody understand what dual agency is? Represent both parties equally. So you cannot give advice to your customer. You can say, here's the documents, here is what I was provided, this is what our listing side gave us. What do you think? Well, here's what they gave us. That must be what they can do. What do you want to do? It's hard to be a dual agent properly or a dual agency properly because you have knowledge of both sides. There's information within your office that you're talking through on your dual agents, in your offices, especially larger offices, that, hey, I've got this buyer who needs this. I got this seller who needs this. How do we make this work? Or ooh, I think I heard that seller's getting a divorce. We might be able to get a little bit better deal. You can't use that with your customer on a house that's listed within your own office. You can have it in the back of your mind, but you can't use it because it's confidential information. So dual agency is one of the biggest things that realtors are brought up on complaints about. So cross your T's, dot your I's. When in doubt, talk to your broker on how they want you to deal with it. Statutory broker, I never do statutory broker because that means I can't talk. And if you notice, I don't talk much. So statutory broker means here's the paperwork. Give it back to me when you're done, and you're going to pay me. We cannot give advice. We cannot give our opinion. Nothing. I think you're misrepresenting the person that you're helping. If you're doing a statutory broker, that's my personal opinion. Adverse material fact we've talked about. So if there's a death in a house, do you have to disclose it? What do you guys think?
I think doesn't it depend on the type of death?
Nope.
If somebody just passes away, if it's an elderly person who passes away, you don't have to disclose it, do you?
You don't have to disclose even if it was a homicide.
You don't?
Nope. So a rule of thumb, and I did have this in a scenario. I dealt with a foreclosure where it was a homicide house, and the court hearing was starting the Monday after I listed the house. So 2 days away. A little $80,000 house in Riverview, knew nothing about it. I wasn't even here during this whole issue with this house. So I get here, I list the house for the foreclosure company, and the police officers are calling me. They're like, hey, we need to do a walk back through the house. The hearing starts on Monday, blah, 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 goes through everything. I'm like, uh-oh. Well, what do I have to do now? What's going on? So I ask my brokers, and I also call my attorney and just say, so what's the deal? So you do not have to disclose that there was a death in the home of any form, unless it was a communicable disease. That's a whole different issue. That's in your documents here. But what the attorneys told us is to kind of err on the side of caution in if they could have seen it in the newspaper, if they could have seen it searching it on the internet, you might want to have a discussion about it unless the seller tells you, no, do not disclose it. Because you do not have to. So in this particular house, we decided to do an open house on Sunday. Like, let's just do this and get this over with, because you know what's going to happen? Front page news, Tribune on Monday is going to be hearing begins, and there's the picture with my real estate sign. I'm like, I'm going to get a lot of customers. I'm kind of liking this advertising at first. I'm new, let's try this. And so I'm like, let's do an open house. So a little $80,000 house in Riverview, we had 250 people through. And you know what they were there to see? If they could figure out where he was killed. They're like looking in the ductwork, they're downstairs, looking in the attic, and you're just like, or in the, the floorboards, you're like, what are you doing? Oh, I could feel where he got killed. Oh, I could feel it. I know. And some of them would ask me, because I wouldn't say it up front. If there was a group of people, I would say it. But some would go, well, don't you have to tell us? Nope, actually we do not. State of Montana does not require it. However, when there's like 50 of you sitting in this room, that's a quarter of the size of this conference room. Let's talk about it so we can just get this out once. I was there, I think, for 4 hours. Like, people just kept coming. Case started on that Monday. Funny, nobody called me to go see the house. They all came through on Sunday. I was like, yeah, just easier. So you don't have to disclose it. However, if it's something that is recent, if it's something that can be easily searchable, talk to the seller, find out what needs to be said or not said. You may or may not know what has happened in that house.
You know, it must be fairly easy, because I've got a buyer that she searches every house to find out if somebody died in that house, and she's been telling me there's houses she won't look at because there was one house that was listed, and it was in Riverview, that the 2 older people died. She goes, that house has got bad JoJo, and I'm like,
Have it smudged.
I'm like,
I come up with all sorts of answers. I had one couple who said that. I'm like, we should pray for the family. Let's take a knee now.
you know, it hurts my knees. I can't. I'm sorry.
But you're not making fun of it, but you
You're
have to
not.
kind of work through them.
But it's important to her. It's a very important thing to her.
But how many
And
houses are left for her to buy?
She's finding it out somehow. I don't know how. I don't
You
ask
can
because it's not
search.
my thing.
You could, I'm sure she's searching death records.
But it gives the address.
Probably depends on if there was, if there was a probate or something. Could be that way.
I don't know, but she's
But
figuring it
you
out.
look at how many houses in this town somebody probably hasn't died in, other than brand new construction. Like an 1895 home, I'm sure several did.
Well, that's just it. I mean,
Interesting, but we've also had is the house haunted?
oh, she sure it is.
I'm like, yep, it is.
She can feel the spirits. I'm like,
I had a gal one time who told me, the little dots that come up, the little dust dots when you're taking a picture. Oh, that's spirits. They were in your picture. I'm like, what? No, that was my lens, because it's not on but it's not on the next one. So I'm like, oh, okay.
did yours buy the house? Mine hasn't bought anything yet.
No, she didn't.
Here's
But
mine.
it was just kind of funny what people will come up with, and you're like, oh, I never knew that. And then you just want to go, what loony bin
Do you have
did
to
you
put that on the buy-sell agreement?
Yeah, I should. Yeah, right. Let's put it on there. Let's make sure. That's one of the inspections, not haunted. Need to have it smudged. And I'm not taking away from any of that stuff, but it's just kind of interesting what comes up in the conversations with people and what are I call it, it's not that it's a superstition. I call it that they haven't found the home that they've fallen in love with.
Mhm.
People will remember what they don't like about a house.
Mhm.
It takes a lot for them to remember what they like about the house. So you have to watch them when they're walking through the home, and you can see it on their face
Mhm.
when it's the house because they can't contain themselves. Big burly guy walks in and he's like, I'm a salesman first. You're not going to sell me nothing. And they're just giddy by the time they get out of the garage. They're like, oh, this is perfect. Oh, we could do this and we could do this. And you're like, oh, I thought we weren't buying a house today.
Yeah.
Well, like, do you want to write it up? Yep. Okay, let's go. So you do have to be careful of those things. If you have a question, ask your broker. Have your broker ask the Montana State Attorney for our real estate stuff. They can send an email over that says, hey, here's the question. What do you think? Answers. He always comes back with good answers. So then you're going to mark, how are we representing people? Are we a seller's agent, a buyer's agent? If you are a statutory broker, you're going to mark here. One of the things under buyer's agent, we did add this section that says that the buyer does not allow you to be a dual agent. So they do have that choice. Before there wasn't a box that said it, we just didn't mark it. Like it was like, oh, okay. So both of these say we could be representing the similar type person, especially on a seller. We could represent more than one seller on that type of house. On a buyer, we could be showing that house to multiple people. Talk to your brokerage about writing more than one offer. You can only represent one buyer on a house. So don't go in and writing 2 offers for 2 different buyers. Because who wins? You do. They don't. And somebody's going to be mad at you and you're possibly going to lose a buyer. If you have 2 people you've shown the house to and you're thinking they're both going to write it, find somebody else in your office or somebody else that you work with a lot and have them write on the second offer. And just explain it to your customer. Here's where we are. You guys both called me at the same time. They were the first one to call me. I'm going to work with them first. And then so-and-so is going to help you on this one so that there's no conflict. And whichever offer wins is going to, and then you'll come back to me and work with me. So be careful of that, especially in a hot market, because it's easy to show the same house to a bunch of people and have multiple people wanting to buy that house. Dual agent is where we're marking here, down here that says we can be a dual agent. And then of course, buyer seller signs. This is one of the only forms that does not auto-populate. And the reason is because it's the same form for the buyer or the seller. So it can't differentiate which side you're on. So this is one form that you do have to go in and manually enter your information on that person. So, all right, so I think we're supposed to be done at 4, right? The eye in the sky is still here?
Probably having a taco.
Right?
You're done.
Oh, we're busted.
So we did not get to listings, things like that, but this is the bigger document. The buy-sell is the bigger side of it. A lot of those forms are the same, other than your listing agreement. And your listing agreement is talking about what's your commissions, what's your price, what stays, and your disclosures. And your owner's disclosure statement is the other big one. Make sure you're getting that. If you're on the buyer side, if you're on the seller side, don't let them just initial the bottom and say nothing's wrong. Again, it's about filling in the blocks. Just don't fill it in for them. They need to fill it in. So, any questions? I know we went through this really fast. If you have questions, by all means, please call me. I'm here to help you. It doesn't make a difference what office you're in. That does not change. If you're getting ready to write an offer and you have questions and you can't find somebody, call me. I know because your broker's not here.
Yeah, but he's really good.
He is. Oh yeah,
He's
Kyle's always
excellent.
available.
The first 5 minutes I talked to him about even joining it, he's like, get online, get this, get that.
Good.
And
But
then
if
he
you're
went
in a
through every
situation-
document with me, you
Good.
know him, so you know
Yeah.
he talks 100 miles a minute.
Right? He talks
So
faster
you're
than I
still
do.
on the first line, and he's showing you the end of it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
just stop and back up.
Right, exactly.